Folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the changing human economics of life in the West that's being forced on us by the globalists, and to see how many hours a Western worker, this assumes the average wage, by the way, but how many hours a Western worker has to work today to have the same standard of living as they had in 2001, 2002. So let me talk a little bit about that, because it illustrates just how far things have gone down the shithole in the West since the globalist project was being forced upon us. By the way, without our consent. We were never asked. So in a democracy, we were never asked. I mean, ponder that for a moment. So I went to a lecture from one of the world's most, at the time, prominent globalist, pro-globalist think tanks. Part of their job was to put out propaganda to soften people up and convince people that not only was globalization going to happen, but there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. Back in the day, I remember looking at this guy who fancied himself as hot shit. I mean, this dude is born into money. He marries into more money. He's being paid nearly $2 million a year to head up a think tank that doesn't make any money. The think tank's not even a tiny bit commercially viable. And here's this guy got the hide to lecture us on what commercial viability is going to look like, when he has no comprehension personally of what it's like, and works in a business that doesn't make any money, and in fact is losing gazillions. Part of it being his monumental salary. But he was paid by the globalists to put out this propaganda and also deliver it in the manner of it's a fait accompli. This is how it's going to be, you fucking peasants, and if you don't like it, too fucking bad, because this is how it is. So he quite correctly, as it turns out, I mean, he must be a soothsayer or the prognosticator of the century or something, but he said, look, I'll paraphrase it a bit here. He said, look, if Western workers are now going to compete, or are now and will more so in the future compete with third world workers, and so your value as a worker will be determined by their value. So they will determine the third world worker will determine the lowest common denominator, and you will now compete with them. And that will mean that your wages will stagnate. He didn't really cover the cost of living thing, where houses would be many times more expensive than they were, and food would be more expensive, energy more. He didn't talk about that. He talked about wage stagnation really as an issue. But in the general architecture of his argument, then you can sort of, it's still as valid today as it was when he said it. So he said, look, your standard of living is going to fall, but this is in the first tranche. So the next 25 years, which is coming, about now, or give or take. He's saying next 25 years, your standard of living will fall by 40% or so. And the only way you can change that equation, he argues, or between 40 and 50%, I think was the point. The only way you can change that equation is you work 40 or 50% more hours, or you become 40 to 50% more skilled, or you just accept your lower standard of living. So that was you've got three courses of action. That's it. Now, I never thought our politicians would sell us out in the way they did, and would be in collusion with the big banks, and so I never thought that would happen. Or certainly, I saw his point that as more worker competitors come, but I never perceived the mass migration thing. The whole lot of things I didn't think would happen. There would be no mass migration. There would be no offshoring, or certainly to the extent that it came to be. And so I didn't think our politicians would sell us out. So there were a few things that I thought would act as a brake against that, which actually didn't come. The politicians couldn't wait to sell us out. The offshoring was massive, and the mass migration, of course, took place. So three things that I didn't count on back in the time. Nonetheless, this spiv says that And he's not that bright either, which also annoyed me. I mean, he's not a moron, but he's not that bright, and he's just a propaganda flunky stooge, born into a wealthy family who's, because he's quite photogenic and all this sort of thing, looks good in his sharp suit. His job is to swan around, lecturing the rest of us on something he actually knows nothing about. But those were the globalist talking points that he was sprouting, which at the time I assume must be something he'd put together, but of course not so. Anyway, coming back to the central thrust, so between 40 and 50% decline in standard of living, and he's really pitching at the average wage here. But if we look at the average wage, then and what the purchasing power of that average wage, then the purchasing power now, it has fallen very considerably. I would say in the especially you related in terms of the essentials of life, such as shelter, energy, food. Then I think it has fallen by about 40%. So over that time, and remember this is like 25 years time span here. So, but if we adjust for somebody who works, say, 56 hours to 57 hours a week, so 40 hours a week is the benchmark. So if you work 56, 57 hours a week, and then you multiply out that extra, say from 40 to 57, those 17 hours of work and the pay that you would get in those 17 hours, then you add that back into your overall salary. So your income is now based on a 57-hour week, not a 40-hour week. Then it comes out as not exactly even, but near enough. Something that couldn't be foreseen is the green energy madness. But if we adjust back for that, then it comes in almost exactly at exactly even if you add the time. So if you're working a 57-hour week, again assuming the average wage, you could live in. You'd have to live modestly, but you could live in a middle to lower middle sort of suburb. The knifings aren't going to be too bad. Just don't go out at night type thing. You have a one-bedroom place, again, modestly furnished. You wouldn't be buying new stuff. You'd be maybe going to like garage sales and things like that. So you have to be quite Spartan, if not frugal in your lifestyle. You couldn't go out to eat for nice restaurants. Even sort of buying a few pizzas would probably be a little bit extravagant. You couldn't really afford alcohol. You'd have to go, given the expense of it. You could run an ordinary car. You'd need to be a bit handy though. If you have to have all the work to the car done by mechanics, you'd have the shop. You'd be in trouble. Otherwise, you'd have to rely on public transport. And if you bought your clothes at Walmart and everything, you could get by. You could live that lower middle class lifestyle. And you could live independently. So that's about that. That's what that wage could have bought you 25 years ago, and this is about what it's going to get you now if you work 57 hours a week compared to the 40 hours you did to work. Now, one of the things that struck me when I first started business traveling was, especially when I went to the poorer countries, even in the mid-range countries, was how many people had to work extra jobs. So, like say in places like Indonesia or Turkey and places like that, people would often work one job plus a casual job or a weekend job or something like that. And this was in a place where there was very high unemployment, so you had to kick back some of your wage to a mafia goon or something like that, or maybe it's a family member. So it's very corruptly handled. But the point being that if people wanted to kind of get by, they sort of had to work 60 hours a week in some of these third world countries. Now, these are countries like, there are countries I go to where $5,000 a year US would get you quite a decent lifestyle. Even in countries that were sort of moving up the value chain, still moving from third world to intermediate sort of middle stage. Even there, $15,000 US would set you up a year would set you up very nicely. So those are the differences in cost of living. Now, one of the problems that this idiot who was pushing the globalist stuff, the one who was doing the lecture, he was, I mean, he can't have been unaware of it, but when you're competing against, when a Western worker that has to pay $100 for a house is competing against a worker that only has to pay $5 for a house, and vastly different cost of living in food and shelter and this sort of thing, then that difference in cost of living is reflected in the sort of salaries they pay and they get. So of course they can work for less money in these third world countries because they've got a much different cost structure. Now, and then when they come to the West, they then live communally, 10, 20 people to a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. So pooling all the resources, they can live again, on a per head basis, much more cheaply than Western people can. So it's not only just that they come from the third world and they're used to a lower income, but they're used to a different way of living. They're used to this communal living where 2, 3, 4 generations of the family will live in the one house, as many Indians do who come to Australia now. This is why they buy these big 5 or 6 bedroom houses, because they got a million generations of their family living there. Half the fucking village lives in the house. So, the village as in from India. So, so a number of differences there that in cost and cost structure, lifestyle, and so on that also need to feed into this life, this quality of life and purchasing power type difference. But this guy doing the lecture, he was adamant this is how it will be. That this is not a matter for debate. This will be happening. This will be inflicted and imposed upon you. Nothing will stop it. And I poo-pooed that. Oh, yeah, sure. But he's actually right. His prognostications have turned out to be almost correct to the letter. But what this means is the globalists had this planned out many years ago, 25, 30, 40 years ago, and they're just running the whole thing to their timetable, down to what your purchasing power is of your paycheck, what you can afford, how much you're allowed to, what sort of lifestyle they will let you have, this type of thing. And this is it. That's the degree of control that they have, and how long ago they put this plan in action, and it's gradually sort of unraveled. I mean, if they hit the Western world, like a sledgehammer straight off, there probably would have been a revolution. But provide they do the boiling frog technique, then so far they've got away with it pretty much. Sure, there are some murmurs, but if you complain about it, then at Davos they'll meet and say, that's it, Nazis, look at those Nazis complaining about over there. That's their first reflex action here. But one thing going to these third world countries was that if people wanted to have a decent lifestyle, they had to work all these extra hours to do it. Maybe they had multiple jobs. You see the same thing in the rural areas in Australia, in small towns where there just aren't many full-time jobs. And it's not unusual for someone to have 10 jobs. They'll work 4 hours a week at this place and 4 hours a week at that place, that type of thing. And if you want to have a middle class life, unless you arrive there with money or you inherit, if you want to have a middle class lifestyle in some of these rural country towns, that's how it is. But that's now becoming the norm, all over the place. Younger people are particularly younger, but the idea of a career job or outside of the public service, the idea of a career job where you're there for many years and it's your skills a bit, because merit's gone, you don't sell your skills anymore. Now you just sell your labour in effect, but then you compete directly with third world peasants in the West now because of mass migration. So the purchasing power of the paycheck's gone down the toilet, and really you need that 55 to 60 hour a week of your labour at the average wage rate if you want to live the same standard of living today as you did 25 years ago. But it just illustrates just how far and how bad things have got in terms of that. And I think it's going to get worse. Nor is it people are working 60 hours a week as they're workaholics. So we need to really sort of say, okay, well, the purchasing power of the paycheck's been eroded so much that you now have to work 60 hours a week to be the equivalent of what a 40-hour paycheck would get you. But in another 10 years, it could be 70 or 80 hours a week, and you're going to live communally as well. So that's the future that's facing us, and it's being imposed and inflicted upon us without our consent. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.